Hindu University. She has researched on post-colonial ecocriticism and other issues of environmental humanities. As a doctoral student, she received a tuition grant from the prestigious School of Criticism and Theory at Cornell University, New York, to participate in a training program and workshop on literary theory and criticism. She also got a travel grant for the International Graduate Students by American Studies Association, Washington, D.C., for a conference presentation in Denver. She has presented her research papers at different national and international conferences with travel grants. Before the pandemic, she participated in a conference on digital humanities at Dartmouth College, New Hampshire. She has quality publications in journals and books published by renowned publishers like Routledge, Taylor and Francis, Lexington, Rowman, Littlefinger, and so on. She has been invited as a guest speaker on the topic of literature and environment for several lecture series. We welcome you, ma'am. Over to you.
Yeah, am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you are.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Karishma, for a generous introduction. So I'm very happy to be here as a guest speaker, and thanks a lot for inviting me here. So, as all of you know, that today I'm going to talk on the implication or importance of post-colonial eco-criticism in the age of Anthropocene. So what I will do today is that the first half of my lecture will concentrate on the very basic definition of eco-criticism. What is eco-criticism? Why do we need to study eco-criticism, etc. Then I will talk about post-colonial eco-criticism and then Anthropocene and the relation between post-colonial eco-criticism and Anthropocene. So as you all know, the importance of studying ecology or environmental science and eco-criticism is largely accepted this time because of so many natural devastation calamities happening around us. So now, eco-criticism, that is a kind of or branch of nature study in the umbrella, under the umbrella term of environmental humanities, involves the study of nature. So what is nature? Nature is very complicated term to define. It is a complicated enough to define because it has multidimensional nuances. It has multidimensional meanings. That is why nature is very difficult to define. It is not that easy. So nature symbolizes not only the essence of a thing, but also the cosmic force that drives the world along with human and non-human species. So we have to always remember that nature involves not only this, environmental aspects around us, like river bodies, sky, rivers, then, ocean, etc., but also non-human others, non-human beings. That is very much important. So nature reading or eco-criticism always involves the study of both human as well as non-human beings. However, recently, unfortunately, I would rather say, some branches of modern science and technology have sectionalized the humans and keep them apart from the rest of the nature. Of course, not all the branches of science and technology do that, but some has done that already. So what they have done is that they have sectionalized or compartmentalized nature as well as human beings. So that is detrimental for both, for nature, for planet, as well as for us humans. So while studying eco-criticism, we have to think about this other aspect of science and technology as well. The Habbock's read on nature in the name of science and technology prove the anthropocentric attitude of science and technology that are fatal to nature and the beings around us. So what is anthropocentric attitude? So, I think meaning is known to almost all of us, that something that centers on human being is opposed to the planetary thought that we are having these days. So something that only concentrates the welfare of human beings. But ironically, it cannot serve the well-being of humans. So it is detrimental for both humans as well as non-humans and for the planet itself. Now, how to define the term ecocriticism? I would like to give a very simple definition first. So, ecocriticism simply is the study of relationship between nature and environment, or literature and environment. The branch of studying humanities like ecocriticism has raised awareness of the devastation of nature. So earlier also we have seen, or people have seen so many devastations, but before the advent of ecocriticism, people were not much concerned with those kind of devastations, particularly the literary critics, the literature, the area of media studies, cultural studies, they were not much concerned about the loss of environment, loss of ecological balance and all. But fortunately, after the advent of ecocriticism, now everyone is getting very much conscious. They are thinking about the importance of preserving nature and all. Now, I would like to cite one of the pioneers of ecocriticism. He is Jonathan Bed, who rightly observes, ecocritical project always involves speaking for its subject rather than speaking as its subject. So this quotation is from Song of the Earth. So he says that ecocriticism is that kind of field of study that speaks for the betterment of its subjects rather than as simply subject. So that is something that differentiates ecocriticism from many other literary and cultural theories. This field of study has analyzed how the destruction of nature will lead to the destruction of the entire planet. The recent phenomena like global warming, resource scarcity, and the different types of pollution hinder the natural flow of human life. So this is very much evident nowadays. I don't have to give much focus on that because it's already known. We can see the cave-in in Uttarakhand, the devastating flood in Himachal Pradesh, and recently also Sikkim, there is a flood. So these things are the proofs, these things that's kind of evident of the ecological devastation and its effect on human beings as well as non-human others. Ecocriticism, many studies of the relationship between mankind and nature has covered each and every issue that shows how human life is closely related to nature. In the paradigm of ecocriticism, human and nature are not separated, but a holistic treatment is meted out to both. Again, to cite another critic, Cheryl Clotfelty, she says, literary theory in general examines the relations between writers, text, and the world. In most literary theory, the world is synonymous with society. I would rather like to say that human society. However, ecocriticism expands the notion of the world to include the entire ecosphere. So the shift is there from society or social sphere to ecosphere. That is happening in the studies of ecocriticism. Ecocriticism aims to restore the status of nature as a silent and passive entity in the dominant discourses of literary theories. So earlier, ecocriticism, or before, as I told, before the advent of ecocriticism, nature used to have a passive entity. But after the advent, or after the arrival or introduction of ecocriticism to the field of literature and cultural studies, nature has acquired or has occupied a quite vast section of studies, a quite vast area. Ecocriticism aims to restore the status of nature as it goes against human-centric thought in favor of a planetary thought. So it's not concerned on human-centric or anthropocentric thoughts, rather it prefers to have a planetary vision. We have different waves of ecocriticism, first wave, second wave, third wave. In the first wave, there were romantic poets who used to treat nature simply as a background. But recently, second wave and particularly third wave, nature has taken a different dimension at all. Now it is not simply a background, but people are studying nature for its own sake, and why it is important and why we should study nature even in the field of literature and other cultural studies. Ecocriticism is concerned with human issue as well, particularly with the issues of people living closer to nature. So who are the people who live closer to nature? So people like, Adivashi, then tribal population, they live closer to nature because their lives are very much dependent on nature. They collect from nature their daily life sustenance like timber and other sources. So they are very much dependent on nature, and the destruction to nature is kind of destruction to the lifestyle of those kind of people who have to depend on nature. So eco-criticism, as already I told, is against any kind of binary of nature culture. In Western humanism and the Enlightenment, the philosophy propounded by this Enlightenment concept, they believe in certain kind of binaries, like, light and darkness, then civilized, uncivilized, etc., nature, culture. So eco-criticism or any branches of environmental humanities, they are opposed to this kind of binaries because they have same kind of vision for everyone. They are very much inclusive. Unlike many other branches of literary studies, eco-criticism also involves a kind of activism. It is very much active. It always speaks for nature as well as non-human beings and the people who has to depend on nature. So it always involves a kind of activism in its study. It exposes the oppression of the marginalized other by the powerful segment of the society. It connects the oppression of nature and non-human beings to the oppression of exploited population. So it talks about, as I told, not only about nature, but also non-human beings and other aspects of nature. It analyzes marginalized people's struggles for the betterment of their natural environment for a healthy life. So we can see that different developmentalist projects have hindered the natural flow of this marginalized population lives, particularly this tribal and other indigenous population. So post-colonial eco-criticism also talks for them because it highlights the issues that these people are facing every day. Like they don't have often access to natural resources, they cannot capitalize their resources, then they have to suffer from lack of resources, lack of land, they don't have access to land. So there is always a kind of dislocation involved. So these things have been studied by post-colonial eco-criticism. It emphasizes that the miseries of people who, after the arrival of the so-called development in their regions, became vulnerable to the forces that dislocate them from their belongings. So many times we have seen that how certain sects of people have been dislocated by different kind of multidimensional projects and multinational corporations. So this is also a kind of studies or an aspect of studies for post-colonial literature and post-colonial criticism per se. They are often forced to live subhumanized life after dislocation. We don't know what happened to them. Sometimes they get their compensation, sometimes not. So there is kind of subhumanization in some cases of this. So post-colonial eco-criticism exposes ideologies of reckless developmentalism and monetary greed that are always associated with the destruction of nature. Resource extraction that dislocate tribal population and makes them vulnerable to subjugation and exploitation is one of the fields of investigation of post-colonial eco-criticism. Destruction of ecology is very much connected with the devastation of economy and the lives of people who are dependent on nature. We can see that this nature and the lives of certain people dependent on nature are very much interconnected. So if you devastate nature, it will have impact on economy and it will have impact on certain people's lives. Post-colonial eco-criticism relates social and economic factors to environmental studies. because it is very much interdisciplinary. So we can see that different studies can be associated with post-colonial eco-criticism or eco-criticism per se, like, environmental philosophy, environmental sociology, then economics and all, even science. The unchecked developmentalism proliferated by the global capitalism is proved to be a curse to nature and the tribal people whose existence are at stake by the profit-driven outlook of the present society. For example, the mining enterprises that violate the rights of land and sustenance of indigenous population. So post-colonial eco-criticism, as you can understand by the very basic term, is very much non-Western because it talks about the natural or the devastation or the condition of nature in the former colonies. So it is post-colonial because it talks about the state of former colonies, and why it is eco-critical because it talks about nature. That is why it is termed as post-colonial eco-criticism. So it talks against forceful dislocation of certain people. It explores issues like deforestation, the violation of rights of indigenous communities. And ironically, the evicted people are not always benefited from the projects for which they have to sacrifice their home. That is an irony to them. So in post-colonial eco-criticism, those topics and issues are woven into plot and they become the themes of the text, an opportunity for social, political, and economic, as well as ecological commentary to explore. Sometimes, with the help of post-colonial eco-criticism, we can dig deeper into the text for this kind of issues that are reflected on the text, like, economic as well as political and ecological. They don't separate politics from ecology because according to these post-colonial eco-critics, these two things are very much well connected or interconnected. Post-colonial eco-criticism combines in itself eco-criticism's concern for the environmental degradation, which is the outcome of colonial invasion, and the post-colonial studies attempt to give voice to the marginalized people's plights in the new colonial states. The division of East-West or Orient and Occident occupy a significant space in the discussion of post-colonial eco-criticism, as these have been with post-colonial studies. So we have certain common things between them. This theory analyzes the binaries present in our society. So in gist, post-colonial eco-criticism combines local ecological awareness with global awareness. Now coming with the term Anthropocene as well as this effect of human being on the geology of Earth. So this is the term associated with science and also technology. So how to define the term? The scientists Paul Cruzen and Eugene Stromer has defined Anthropocene as life. In the contemporary era, humanity has become a dominant geological force capable of changing the history of the Earth. So this Anthropocene has been reflected in Dipesh Chakraborty's The Climate History 4th thesis. Both of these theses and the term defined by this Cruzen and Stromer, they analyze, as I told, that how humanity has become a force that can even change the entire planet. So that is why we have to take this Anthropocene very seriously, because it has the capacity, or now human beings have achieved that capacity to change the entire planet. But this change is not always for the betterment of the planet or for the betterment of the living beings in the planet or inhabitants of the planet, but sometimes it can go against. So in recent years, post-colonial and other scholars have articulated various elements of a critique of the Anthropocene discourse, which has mostly centered on its universalistic implication. So although this Anthropocene is kind of technological or scientific term, but we can see its reflection in literature and other cultural studies. The human agency itself is responsible for the environmental catastrophes like the global warming, melting of glaciers, and different types of pollution across the world. Anthropocene is reflected in the acts of deforestation, emission of greenhouse gases, and effects on global temperature and species extinction on a global scale. So these are the things that are happening with Anthropocene. Therefore, it is obvious that Anthropocene is a field of investigation for the scholars of ecocriticism, because we can see these common points. Both ecocritic or environmental humanities scholars, they also talk about these things that have their own implications and reflection in the term of Anthropocene. Therefore, the discussion of Anthropocene is a part of literature, media, and other domains of cultural studies. The age of Anthropocene can be marked from the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. As you know, this term can be traced back from the age of Industrial Revolution, like how nature has been exploited to foster industrial growth of certain countries, particularly England. The age of Anthropocene can be marked here, and also now in India, we can see so many developmental projects are being taken as, and these sometimes have bad effects, negative effects on nature and humans. It is visible in the form of human dominance that post-colonial eco-criticism also critiques. So that is why we can relate these two terms, this Anthropocene as well as post-colonial literature or post-colonial eco-criticism, because both of them talk against this kind of human domination, and they talk or they prefer a kind of planetary thought opposed to anthropocentric thought. While discussing the Anthropocene in cultural context, we need to address different power dynamics in the society. As I told that according to post-colonial eco-critics, ecology or environment cannot always be separated from politics. So post-colonial eco-critics as well as the critics of Anthropocene, the scholars discussing or studying Anthropocene, they also believe in power dynamics in the society that causes harm to certain people who are at the peripheral level or who belongs to the margin. Ecocriticism and post-colonialism had every reason to be suspicious, if not necessarily dismissive of humanism, which has been routinely attacked for practicing a selective universalism that disguises specific race, class, and gender. It is a quote by Hugan and Tissing. These two scholars are very much well known as post-colonial eco-critics. So they think that humanism should, particularly the Western notion of humanism, should be critiqued or criticized because they are not always inclusive. They talk from a particular point of view. So eco-critics, according to Hugan and Griffin, has always a reason to be suspicious of such kind of humanism. Now anthropos, that means humans, related to humans, as a geological force is still in each instance the product of specific political, social, cultural, and economic realities. It's another quote. So Anthropocene or anthropos are related to things related to Anthropocene. They have this kind of specific political, social, and economic things to share with, that they deal with. So we cannot separate these things from environment in the age of Anthropocene that we are now. So Deepesh Chakraborty, for example, has commented or pointed to the globally different per capita emission varies, how they varies from across different countries across the globe. So he quotes, a common but differentiated responsibility for global warming. According to him, that all humans are not equally responsible for global warming because of the per capita emission calculation and how these things differ from countries to countries, from region to region, and how these things are very much dependent on, class, gender, etc. So we cannot blame all humans equally for the kind of anthropocene age that we are belonging to. Therefore, postcolonial ecocriticism and the discourse of Anthropocene speak for all marginalized entities. They are now speaking for all marginalized entities instead of any particular section because they feel that both nature and marginalized sections are exploited by mainstream society, dominant society, and how these exploitations are interconnected. In many cases, the effects of climate change like drought, famine, wildfire are not given proper attention in case of vulnerable countries. As I told, that this vulnerability can happen with the section of population, with certain countries. So we can see that sometimes natural calamities are not discussed in case of vulnerable countries. Natural calamities that take part there, that happens there, is always or sometimes always ignored. Although, fortunately, these scenarios is being changed nowadays. So, postcolonial ecocriticism exposes the capitalistic system that is one of the causes of Anthropocene. They believe that the capitalist system, the consumerist economy, they are responsible for this kind of natural devastation that we are having or we are seeing, we are witnessing. The socio-economic as well as environmental concerns should be addressed. So in case of both these, Anthropocene as well as post-colonial eco-criticism, we have to think the socio-economic as well as environmental concerns. They foster an environmental vision that deals with the local histories, and they have to broaden their view with global histories as well. Because sometimes we can see even different issues are being taken without proper consultation with the local communities, local people. So they believe a certain kind of ecology, a certain kind of system, certain kind of solution, which involves both local as well as global environmentalists, as well as local and global concern. So that is very much important because according to these post-colonial eco-critics, no welfare can be done without proper consultations from the localites. So that is very much important here. So in this way, we can see the interconnection between post-colonial eco-criticism as well as the current age of Anthropocene. And we have to be very much cautious of the natural devastation taking place around us. So what we can do is that we have to think or we have to understand and our responsibilities and our shared concern for nature and also the marginalized population and non-human beings as well. So in this way, we can overcome the devastation of destruction of nature with the help of certain literary theories like post-colonial eco-criticism. Thank you so much for your attention. So I'm ending my lecture here.
Now the floor is open for questions. Thank you, Dr. Nivedita, for your wonderful and engaging talk. Participants, you can directly write in the chat box, or you can also ask questions to the speaker. We can take questions from the chat box as well as if you raise your hand, we can also go by that. In the chat box, there is no question so far. Participants, if you have any questions, you can directly ask to the speaker. Okay, seems there is no question, but I have actually one question regarding this, Anthropocene. As you know, there are a lot of disagreements, when the Anthropocene started. Some people, some scientists, they think that it started during the Industrial Revolution, just after that. And there was recently, another recent view came like it started from 1950. It is actually introducing a new geological epoch after Holocene. So that is like argument, like are we as Paul Crutzen kind of said that we are no more in the Holocene and we already we are living in Anthropocene, but there are a lot of disagreements regarding that. So as you're connecting this idea like Anthropocene and post-colonial eco-criticism, I feel like you have talked about a lot of indigenous people, how they more conscious about nature. Maybe the tribal people in India, or in general the term like indigenous people. So do you think there is like this awareness or eco-consciousness? Is there any kind of like, is it coming more from the indigenous people, like they are more aware of this impact of Anthropocene, like how human beings are altered the environment since the Industrial Revolution, or is it more like urban people also they have started understanding this eco-consciousness and they are taking steps? Like where is this where is this trend kind of going? Is it like mostly like people who are close to nature, they are more conscious, like they're directly involved with nature in terms of collection of natural resources? Or is it also urban people, they are also kind of becoming more conscious about this Anthropocene and like humans' impact on the planet?
Actually, it is true in both ways. Because, these days we can see that urban people or urban population is being conscious about this nature and environment, preservation of ecology. But at the same time, we can see so many developmentalist projects taking place, like, building so many flats, etc., dams and other constructions. So I can say that already with indigenous population or tribal population, the sense was there, because as you mentioned that I mentioned that they are very much dependent, so they have to have a sense of sacredness of nature that is very much visible in different literature also, although not written by tribal people but people from mainstream literary areas. But nowadays, I can see that even, environmentalists coming from this kind of urban population, and I don't think this tribal population, they have the sense of the term Anthropocene per se, because Anthropocene is something very much, scientific, it's urban term, it's related to, a kind of study. But apart from this term, what they are doing, these tribal people and all, it is from their own conscience, from their own inward sense, inherent sense, and responsibility to the ecology, to nature, that they are preserving or they are trying to preserve nature. But it is also a fact that all tribals and all indigenous people of the same community cannot be of equal nature conscious. Similarly, it goes for urban population. All people cannot have the sense of shared responsibility. So there are certain people, certain populations, certain group of people, NGOs and all, who are coming forward from urban area, as well as there are certain communities from rural areas. So in a sense, we need both efforts for the conservation of our ecology.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Nivedita, for answering the question.
Thank you. This is a very interesting question.
Any more actually questions from the participants? Okay, so there is one question actually. Is there a fixed beginning date for the Anthropocene? In the chat box, there is a question.
Is there any fixed beginning date for the Anthropocene? Okay. I think there is no such fixed date. Although it has been, talked about by, Hussein and Soma, but Anthropocene was there from the very beginning. So I cannot say that, there is any fixed date, but it was there from the very beginning. But only thing is that people got conscious about it. I hope I have correctly answered it, because according to my knowledge, there is no fixed date like that.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, I have a question. Can I ask?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Yeah, so you have been talking about the ecological system and everything. It was brilliant. I just wanted to ask you that how waste management also features when it comes to the idea of ecological saving, quote unquote, we save ecology. So do you think the waste management is also a part of it? And how much non-being is in the being of ecological criticism?
Of course, it is there. Of course, it is there. Waste management, waste collection. Actually, all these things belongs to this kind of environmental humanities, and we have different nuances, different issues to that. So, of course, there is that. But, for what I can say is that post-colonial eco-critics and, eco-critics in general, they do study literary texts, literary and cultural texts and all. So waste management, it's very difficult right now to find stresses in any literature and all, but it can be an interesting field of study. Thanks for asking that.
Yeah, because I always thought that, this nature per se is not only in the being of human or animals or even plants. For instance, the distributed intentionality which Latour talks about is also something that is relevant when we are talking about how to save the nature. So whether nature needs to be saved or whether nature in itself does not support this only saving agenda, but creating and recreating and the biological spaces.
Both are true, actually. You have to recycle, you have to recreate to save nature. And also, I think nature needs protection, because earlier days it didn't have or didn't feel like that. But since we are age of the Anthropocene and so much population pressure and so much other issues like pollution and this waste management, another important issue. So I think now nature needs our effort to save her.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you for a wonderful question.
Thank you, Dr. Nivedita. There is, I think, one more question in the chat box. I just saw regarding land use, land cover change. Are you able to see that?
Let me check. No, I cannot see it.
Okay, just a minute. Yeah, I can't see it now, but sometimes back I saw it. Maybe. Anyway, I can't see that question. So regarding that, fixed beginning date for the Anthropocene, I have, I think it depends on the IU, GS. I just want to make a comment on that, International Union of Geologic Sciences, IUGS, they recommended, to make the beginning from 1950, but it must be, officially adopted by the IUGS. There was a recommendation to start actually Anthropocene from 1950 onwards, but it has not been, done yet. So there is no formal beginning in that sense. So there is a lot of still disagreements regarding the beginning of the Anthropocene.
Right. As there is no beginning for global warming as well, right? Climate change, global warming, and many people are still denying it, many nations.
Yes,
So,
yes.
thank
But
you.
still in climate change, you can say like we generally say that industrial revolution because since then the amount of carbon dioxide, started to increase
Yeah, that is
enormously.
there. Hmm.
Yeah, and right now it's like more than 400, parts per million ppm. So the industrial revolution is kind of a crucial point, regarding you can say Anthropocene, and it is also related to all of these, greenhouse gas emissions, like increased amount of greenhouse gas emissions. I think we have received one question in the chat box from Bindusri. I am reading that question. As you are talking about indigenous people, do you think political system is adopting and paying attention to the environmental protection? If yes, how it could help indigenous people? As we see, there is a huge domination over indigenous people. Can we expect better future?
So I can see the answer itself in the question. Yes, I think now there is awareness about the rights of indigenous people. Many initiatives are taken for the betterment of indigenous people, unlike the earlier times. So in nutshell, the thing is that now people are becoming aware of their own rights and also the preservation of nature ecology. So political parties as well as NGOs and urban population, even these tribal people themselves are coming forward for their own rights. So I think it is there. But human society cannot get rid from any kind of domination. That's what I think. So of course, domination is there and domination will be there probably. But still, I think there is kind of awareness being created because these issues have been talked about in different literatures and all. So I think these things have created some kind of awareness, hopefully. But issues are there as well.
Thank you for answering that question. I have also one, I was thinking about this topic you have presented, and that, there is always top-down approach. Actually, if you look at the protection, conservation, laws and how conservation has been done throughout, in India and even in other parts of the world, like protected, how we have tried to protect our nature through creating rules and regulation like reserve forest, protected forest, there are other national park. So there is always a top-down approach, on the indigenous people. It has actually displaced people from their like they were always living close to the nature, but because of there is a whole history of displacement involved with conservation of how government actually different governments have done conservation in our country and in East Africa, in USA, for example. So recently, I think there is another, approach has come up specifically in the context of the Sundarbans, which is a mangrove forest in West Bengal, that, Vision 2050, where they are talking about, relocating people from the vulnerable zone, like totally depopulating the region, and so that, mangrove can come back. So it is again, kind of very in conflict. It has not been done yet, but there are a lot of literature recently came up from the, you can say, conservation agencies like WWF. They have written 2050, Vision 2050, where they are talking about like, shifting people from these climate vulnerable zones, because Sundarban is also very much, affected by climate change, coastal erosion and rising sea level. So again, they are not, not much voice from the local community. If they want to actually relocate to other places from the Sundarbans. So again, there is a more actually kind of a top-down approach if we look at, in those whole conservation kind of, policies or practices. So indigenous people, how they are protected, or local people, marginalized people, how that much, they are protected. That is a little bit, there is a question of that.
Right.
I mean, that is my personal actually view. Even though there are laws actually of protection of local communities, 2006, I think law came regarding the tribal people, people who are living close to the forest or in the forest. But still there are, in reality or in practice, how that much is followed, or the how
Right.
we are able to bring the voice from the local people in conservation policies or in general, development policies. That is still, debatable, I think.
Yeah, I think we need concern from local population as well as we need a team of experts who can guide like how to do this or maintain this conservation. For example, this forest and all. Even USA, it happened long back, Yellowstone, for example, where this, tribal people or indigenous population has been displaced to build this kind of national forest, reserve forest. So these things are always there. And also these mining enterprises, mining industries, because of these mining activities in this indigenous area, so many people are being displaced. So I think more consciousness is required, more awareness.
Thank you, Dr. Nivedita.
Thank
I don't see
you.
any more questions in the chat box. We still have a little bit of time, 2 minutes time. If any last question, if there is any question, the last, we can take one more question. Okay, seems like there are no more questions from the audience. So I think we can, now conclude this session. I thank Dr. Nivedita Bandyopadhyay for, delivering this wonderful talk on relevance of post-colonial eco-criticism and, connecting this idea with Anthropocene. I also thank our Associate Dean, Dr. Thaya Afzal, for supporting us and, giving us this opportunity to organize this national seminar. I thank our IT department for their technical support, and I also thank all the participants for joining this afternoon session. Thank you, and we will meet tomorrow.
Thank you, Dr. Priyanka, and thank you all associated with this conference. Thanks for inviting me here, and this kind of wonderful discussion we had today. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm leaving the meeting then.
Yes, yes. Thank you.
Thank you.